I never thought I would be the kind of person who would have to call the police on my own father, let alone see the look of utter betrayal and shock on his face as he realized I wasn't backing down. But here we are. It all came to a head the day my parents, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, stood in my living room and tried to evict me from the house I had worked for years to pay off, all because they had given my younger brother, Mark, a nearly $1 million home and now suddenly found themselves with nowhere to go. My father, completely unhinged by my refusal, actually lifted his hand and slapped me not a light tap, but a jarring, painful blow right across my face, the sound echoing in the silence of my own home. My question to you, right now, before I tell you how all this unraveled, is simple. When your family asks you to sacrifice everything you've ever earned because of their own poor decisions, and they resort to physical violence when you say no, were you still obligated to help them? Was I wrong for the calculated, absolutely devastating move I made next? This entire saga, this absolute mess that destroyed my family, started innocently enough, or so I thought, about 1.5 years ago. Let me properly introduce myself. I'm Alex, 35 years old, and I've always been the responsible one, the quiet achiever. My younger brother, Mark, is 30, and he's always been the golden child, the one who never quite learned the meaning of a dollar or a work ethic, because our parents were always there to bail him out. For years, I watched my parents pour money into Mark's failed businesses, pay off his exorbitant credit card debts, and generally cushion his life while I, the older sibling, was expected to be self-sufficient, and I was. I got a stable job, saved relentlessly, and 5 years ago, I bought a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house in a decent, rapidly appreciating neighborhood. I was so proud when I paid off the mortgage just last year. It was my sanctuary, the physical manifestation of my hard work, and the only truly large asset I possess. My parents, David and Susan, had a beautiful, large home that they had owned for nearly 30 years. It was in a desirable, older neighborhood, and its value had skyrocketed. They had always talked about downsizing, but Mark's impending wedding to a woman with frankly extravagant tastes seemed to accelerate things. Mark and his fiancée, Chloe, kept complaining about not being able to afford a place that met their standards, meaning a place that cost a fortune. So, in a move that blindsided me, my parents sold their house. They got an incredible price, over $5 million. I was happy for them, assuming they were splitting that money for their retirement and maybe setting aside a little for Mark. I was wrong, completely and utterly wrong. They used $950,000 of the sale to buy Mark and Chloe a massive new construction house in a ridiculously exclusive community, essentially handing them the down payment and paying off a substantial chunk of the mortgage so their monthly payments were laughably small. They justified it by saying, "Mark needs a good start, Alex, you're already established." Established to them meant being able to fend for myself while Mark was given the equivalent of winning the lottery. I was hurt, yes, but I swallowed it. It was their money, after all, and I didn't need their help. I tried to focus on my own life and the peace of my own home. I thought they would use the remaining $550,000 for a condo or a retirement property for themselves. But Mark and Chloe, of course, had one more extravagant request, a destination wedding in Italy. My parents, desperate to see Mark happy, poured another substantial chunk of their remaining money, around $200,000, into this ridiculously elaborate wedding. They came back from Italy, beaming, but financially depleted. A few months passed, and I heard whispers. Mark and Chloe were already complaining about the taxes and upkeep on their new $950,000 home, completely oblivious to the fact that my parents were now living in a tiny, overpriced short-term rental apartment. It was temporary, they claimed. They were looking for a retirement property. The looking seemed to involve a lot of trips to fancy showrooms, but no actual commitment. Then, the lease on their temporary place was suddenly not renewed. And that's when the calls started. They initially asked if they could stay with me for a couple of weeks, while they finalized a new place. I hesitantly agreed, mainly out of residual duty. 2 weeks turned into 4, 4 turned into 6. And then, the true motive, the sheer audacity of their plan, was revealed. My mother, Susan, sat me down one evening holding a perfectly brewed cup of tea, looking utterly serene and completely out of touch with reality. She started with a long preamble about how my father's retirement account hadn't performed as well as they hoped, and how the short-term rentals were draining their remaining cash. Then she dropped the bomb. "Alex, we've made a decision. It's for the best, really. Your house is simply too big for one person. We've decided we're going to move in permanently. We need a stable base, and honestly, we're going to need to sell this house to finance our future." She said it with the casualness of ordering a dessert. I thought I misheard her. "Sell my house, Mom. What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. My father walked in then, standing behind her, a posture of absolute authority. He chimed in, "We'll just have to put your name back on the deed, son, as a matter of formality. We'll cover all the expenses, of course. We've done so much for you over the years. This is the least you can do to help us in our time of need." The sheer entitlement in his voice made my blood run cold. They had done so much for me. They had gifted my brother almost $1 million and were now broke because of it. And they saw my house, the one I paid for myself, as their fallback plan. I reminded them that Mark's house was huge, far too large for just 2 people, and that Mark should take them in. My mother immediately scoffed. "Oh, Mark's house is not set up for that, Alex. Chloe would never allow it. Besides, Mark needs his space to start his family." In other words, Mark's convenience and Chloe's happiness superseded my financial security and life's work. So that's the situation I was in. They were expecting me to sign over the one thing that made me financially independent, so they could liquidate the asset to fund a retirement they had foolishly gambled away on Mark, while Mark lived in the lap of luxury, untouchable. I was staring down the barrel of homelessness, or at the very least, total financial dependence, all because they refused to make Mark take responsibility, or, God forbid, sell the house they bought him. I had to make a choice, be the obedient son and become a martyr, or stand up for myself and face the fury of a family that only knew how to take. Before I tell you what happened next, what I finally said and what my father did, I want you to pause this and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let them take your house, or would you have fought back, knowing it would fracture your family forever? I looked from my mother's pleading, calculating eyes to my father's stony, demanding face. My decision was instantaneous and absolutely firm. I stood up, walked to the front door, and threw it open. "The answer is no," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through me. "You are not selling my house. This is my property. I worked and paid for it. If you have no money, that is the consequence of your choices, not mine. Mark and Chloe's house has 4 empty bedrooms. You can go and live there. If you are not out of this house by tomorrow morning, I will call the police and have you formally trespassed." The shock on their faces was palpable. My mother started crying, using her classic manipulation tactic, wailing about how I was abandoning them. My father, David, however, went from shock to pure, terrifying rage. He took a step toward me, his face turning an unhealthy shade of red. "How dare you talk to your mother like that? We are your parents. You will do as we say," he yelled, his voice booming. I stood my ground, crossing my arms. "I dare because this is my house, and you have 0 claim to it. Leave now." That's when he did it. He raised his hand and struck me hard across the cheek, the force of the slap making my head snap sideways. The pain was secondary to the absolute horror that this man, my father, had just physically assaulted me. I touched my stinging cheek, looking at him with an expression that must have made him flinch for a second. Get out, I repeated, quieter this time, but with an icy finality. My mother pulled my father away, terrified by what he had done and by the look in my eyes. They left that evening, not going to Mark's, as I later found out, but checking into a cheap motel, their pride too wounded to ask Mark for anything less than a takeover of his house, which he immediately refused. The following month was silent and tense. My brother, Mark, called me only once, screaming at me about how I was cruel and heartless for leaving our parents homeless. I simply replied, "They gave you $950,000 house, Mark. You give them a room. If not, they are your problem now, not mine." I blocked his number after that call. I didn't regret my choice, not even for a moment, but I was still shaken by the slap, the sheer disrespect, and the attempted theft. Then, one rainy Tuesday, about 4 weeks after the confrontation, I received a call. It wasn't my family. It was a local police detective. "Mr. Alex, I need you to come down to the station. This is regarding your parents, David and Susan. They're in big trouble." My heart hammered, but I kept my breathing steady. I drove down there, my mind racing through possibilities. I met the detective, a stern woman named Detective Miller. She laid out the situation. Apparently, in their desperation and financial panic after selling their house, they bought Mark's house. My father had moved a substantial sum of money, about $300,000, out of a shared joint investment account that he held with his older sister, my Aunt Carol, who was elderly and relied on that money for her medical care. Aunt Carol had finally noticed the discrepancy and filed a report. It was a classic case of fiduciary duty violation and potential elder financial abuse. The money was technically still having been poured into Mark's house and the wedding. The detective informed me they had been arrested that morning. She then added, "We know they've been staying in a motel and are financially distressed. The question we have for you, as their only other immediate family, is whether you are willing to testify to their erratic financial behavior and help us locate the rest of the funds they've been moving around." I leaned back in the plastic chair, feeling a profound sense of calm wash over me. The slap, the entitlement, the attempted eviction. It all flashed through my mind. They had literally tried to steal my future and destroy my life, all for the sake of the golden child. I looked the detective right in the eye and calmly replied, "Your parents are in big trouble. Detective, that is genuinely unfortunate. I've had very little contact with them for the past month. However, I can confirm that my father recently became physically violent with me when I refused to sell my only asset to fund their retirement, which they liquidated to purchase my brother a nearly $1 million home. I know nothing about their finances, and I don't feel comfortable getting involved. As for testimony, I will only answer questions under formal subpoena. You should also check the financial trail leading to the purchase of my brother, Mark's house. I believe a substantial portion of the funds in question may have gone directly into that property." The detective eyebrows shot up. She looked at me, realizing I was neither defending them nor helping them. I had just, with the quiet power of the truth, tossed my brother and his luxury house into the center of a criminal investigation, which would surely complicate things for my parents and certainly for Mark and Chloe. The final consequences were swift and total. My parents were released on bail, facing serious charges. Mark's life quickly became a nightmare. The police traced the funds, a chunk of which was directly tied to the down payment on his house. Mark and Chloe were not charged, but the property was tied up in legal proceedings and civil suits from Aunt Carol. Mark, furious and desperate, turned on my parents, saying they had ruined his life. The golden child finally saw the consequence of his parents enabling. The $950,000 house became a symbol of their financial ruin, a debt-ridden weight hanging over them all. My parents ended up having to live with Mark and Chloe, the ultimate irony, in a tense, toxic environment, fighting constantly because the money was gone and the responsibility for their mess was Finally shared, the family completely splintered. I cut off all contact. I kept my house, my sanity, and my self-respect. The pain from the slap faded, but the lesson remained. Sometimes the family you are born into will try to take more than they give, and standing your ground, even if it means watching them fall from their own poor choices, is the only way to save yourself. It was a devastating, heartbreaking mess, but I was the one standing at the end of it, in my own home, safe and financially free. So, that's the end of my story, or at least the major, explosive part of it. I'm still processing the fact that my parents valued my brother's comfort more than my security, and that the only way to truly stop the bleeding was to cut the whole toxic limb off. My life is quiet now, peaceful and entirely mine. Like this video if you were on my side and think I made the right choice to protect myself and my future. Subscribe for more stories like this where I share the unbelievable things people do in the name of family. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess, especially what you think about Mark and Chloe having to live with my parents in that gigantic house now, in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.